A lot of people think about when you start hearing about the Super Bowl being talked about, you hear about the commercials and how much they cost, but not a lot of people know all the details that go into that stuff. And we've been fortunate in our careers to work on a lot of programs, both with buying media around and in the Super Bowl, but also working with league partnerships.
Yeah, I think I've managed big sponsorships with the Super Bowl specifically, which to get the rights to, generally you're talking about billion-dollar brands to even consider buying the rights to a Super Bowl. And then when Rick's talking about buying commercials, which he's done, that is also mega money. So that's one thing. A lot of times I love watching Super Bowl commercials with you because whether it's a minute or a 30-second spot, I'm always thinking, or depending when it is in the game, it's like, how much did that cost? So I want you to talk a little bit about how much just the commercial costs, and then there's also a lot of other costs with that. So you think it's a huge amount of millions of dollars, but it's actually even more. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the number you hear right now, the top end of Super Bowl cost right now is about $5.6 million for a 30-second spot.
Oh, that's all?
Yeah, that's it. Which is why you don't see a lot of small companies or, even mid-level companies buying spots in it, because it's a significant investment. But what they don't tell you is that usually that $5.6 million is one half of what you end up having to commit to that network. So this year the game's on Fox. Fox will not just sell you a Super Bowl spot, they want to sell you a package of commercials inclusive of the Super Bowl spot. So you'll get, a $10 to $15 million total package, and part of that will be a Super Bowl spot.
And so obviously the commercials themselves, when he's talking about that, he's just talking about the airtime. That is just to buy the commercials, but there are a lot of other costs that go with it as well. I know with my history, we would develop commercials. Those cost sometimes like millions of dollars just to produce and make the commercial itself.
Right. And nowadays, in the years when I was first doing this 10, 15 years ago, you bought the spot ran, and then you had the long tail of activity around the spot after it aired. But that first time anyone ever saw it was in the game.
Right, so it's a big debut.
Now all the spots you can go online right now and watch all the spots. So you have to build the campaign, again, the investment in time and resources to create the actual ad unit, but also the social media campaign around it in the run up to the Super Bowl, and then all of the tail end activity around that as well.
And then you see a lot of companies, so there's some that their entire strategy is to do one Super Bowl ad a year, which probably isn't what I would recommend, because that's going to blow your budget. But a lot of the companies that you see don't have just one Super Bowl ad. They're running sometimes it's multiple ads and multiple spots. So let's give an example. Like Budweiser is a great example. They do a lot of Super Bowl ads. Some of the Frito-Lay also. So you'll see sometimes multiple Doritos ads. How much are they in for just for the Super Bowl?
Well, the number on Budweiser is a good example. This year they're running at least one Bud Light Seltzer, which is a product spot, and then another one that's Budweiser. Usually they do the Clydesdale spots, more anthem spots. And when you have multiple spots, you can afford to kind of do that. But they're also an NFL sponsor, and they've been investing in the NFL across the entire year as well. So they're in it for tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not just the Super Bowl investment on their side. But they're a good example of a brand that invests heavily in the Super Bowl and always has. Pepsi's another one that's been in it for a long time. Coca-Cola's back in it this year. They took a break last year. But other brands, a lot of automotive brands will use it to do anthem spots, not just specific product launches.
Explain what an anthem spot is.
So an anthem spot would be more like a brand, not product specific spot, more about this is what the brand wants to evoke, or this is what they want to stand for, and not necessarily just a specific type product.
And I think lately in the last few years, I've been seeing more ads that kind of are trying to trigger an emotional response. They're not the big flashy burping or funny ads. You're seeing some more kind of serious, emotionally driven ads. So I feel like the tone of the ads have changed too, to speak to the anthem spot.
Yeah, well, they're trying to get people, all brands and all good, marketing, organizations want to draw out an engagement with people, and obviously triggering some sort of emotive response is the best way to do that. So that what you'll see are these, high touch, highly emotional ads that are designed to generate some sort of reaction, because it's not just about establishing a brand presence in the game, it's also about getting consumers to follow you and to react to you once the game's over.
So keeping that brand connection going, because it's not a flash in a pan. You want to build a relationship, obviously.
Right. Absolutely.
So let's say I'm not $1 billion brand. I know it might be a shock, but it's true. And some of us live in small towns or are working not with huge companies, but this is still a massive event. So how can people that don't have the resources to have a sponsorship? So there are that's another thing I want to cover. There are some rules that people might not be aware of. So one, if you want to leverage the Super Bowl, which I like to call it the superb owl, because that is another thing you might not know, is you have to be careful sometimes how you actually even speak about it. So can you hit on a couple of those items?
Yeah, so you can't, so in order to offer any type of event or program that involves the word Super Bowl or even Super Sunday, which are trademarked phrases by the NFL, you can use them as a small business. So bars and restaurants that have Super Bowl viewing parties where they're having people come in, they're not charging people to watch the game, but they're providing drink specials or food specials or those types of things. That's allowed. I mean, it's technically something that the NFL can take you to court over, but they're not going to, every small town like we live in is going to have restaurants and bars that do that. And that's not necessarily a big violation. If you're promoting an event and you're charging people to come watch the Super Bowl and effectively taking on the idea of being a sponsor of or sponsoring an event that's featuring the Super Bowl, that's where you start to run into trouble with the league and with the legal restrictions. You don't want to, as a small company or brand, you want to capitalize on the momentum around the game, but you don't want to put yourself in a negative legal position with an entity like the NFL.
And a good caveat to that is, if you are unsure, be careful with using the words Super Bowl. And one way I've seen people use it is just call it the big game. Everybody knows what you're talking about, but technically Super Bowl is owned by the NFL. You can't really use it unless you're a sponsor in a completely safe way, but you could always say big game. There's other ways to leverage that language in a way that consumers understand without getting yourself in hot water.
Yeah, if you're creating ads as a small business and you're trying to use the Shield logo or the logos of the individual teams that are in the game, you're going to run into trouble with that, because that's where you start potentially misrepresenting yourself as a sponsor, and there are companies that are paying, as you mentioned earlier, big dollars for that, right? So that's a place you want to kind of stay away from.
So what are you, I love watching the Super Bowl with you, especially with the commercials, because I'm always asking like, oh, how much was that one? How much was that one? What are you most looking forward to this weekend from an advertising standpoint?
I think it'll be interesting. This is the first time you're seeing big political ads in the Super Bowl. So Mike Bloomberg and Donald Trump are both have ads in the Super Bowl, and the Bloomberg one is landing, from what I've read about it, it's landing somewhere between somewhere in halftime just before the third quarter starts, which is a big spot to run an ad. That's where you would pay on the higher end of the scale from a timing perspective during the game. So that'll be really interesting, because you don't usually see this is usually a non-political event. To see those drawn into it is kind of interesting. Also, you always want to see what the Budweiser, with the people that have been there before doing, like what's Budweiser doing. Hyundai's in there now with a new spot with lots of celebrity talent in it. So you want to kind of see how those things are playing together, and that I actually really enjoy watching the Super Bowl for some of the bad ads, like some of the ads that just don't make any sense, or why are they there? The other thing to look for, especially if you're watching it in a smaller market, is what are those local ads that are there? Yeah. Because the local ads don't cost as much. I mean, you can still buy a Super Bowl ad on your local market, like we get the feed out of Eugene, Oregon, that would be something in the low, probably 5-figure range. I don't know exactly what the costs are, but you can, it's affordable for some companies. So you might see some funny, pay attention to the spots that you look at that are not national spots, because those are kind of interesting to see as well. See what local businesses around you are buying.
Yeah. Well, excited.
Yeah, should be fun. Hopefully it's a good game.
We'll see.